It just became possible to make this insane looting farm. Hello there, Ray here, and 8 years ago I made some special AFK looting farms, but there was a problem. One of my crazy looting farm ideas didn't work. I wanted to store mobs up in a different dimension and then throw projectiles through the portals to kill them on the other side. But there was a bug that was stopping this from working, as the game would forget who actually threw these things, meaning you wouldn't get the special loot like blaze rods from blazes. But after all these years, the bug that was stopping me was finally fixed. So during my live streams I got straight to work designing some new crazy farms. I have 3 different designs, each using some unique mechanic. First up is this one. One of the most useful places in order to use looting 3 is to get the wither skeleton skulls. And that's from the wither skeletons themselves. So I went ahead and tweaked out my wither skeleton farm. What I got here is just my simple version where they spawn up above. They would fall down here, and then I have my tamed wolf here kill them, and then there's a chance of dropping the wither skulls. But there's a problem. Since our dog is killing the wither skeletons and not the player, we won't get the looting effect that the swords offer. And by having looting on the sword, you can change your chance of getting a wither skull from 2.5% to 5.5%, meaning that you almost get twice as many wither skulls from the same amount of skeletons. So this is the perfect farm to use my looting through the nether portal in order to get a higher chance of getting wither skull. So I went ahead and took my same farm, and I just removed the dog down here and replaced it with a dripstone point and a trapdoor above it with some lava. So when they fall down, they're going to take quite a bit of damage, but then if they ever get stuck down here, the lava will push them through over into this nether portal. And if we go through this nether portal, we're going to put them over into the overworld. Pushing them through over into the overworld has another benefit. That's because the game only naturally spawn in so many hostile mobs for the nether dimension, and if they happen to just sit around here, we can't spawn in any more. But if we push them over into the overworld, all of a sudden they're no longer counting to the mob cap over here. So the game will actually spawn in even more wither skeletons. This way we can actually pile up the wither skeletons in the overworlds. Let's go over to the overworld and see what's going on over here. So over here in the overworld we have another nether portal, which is the one where the wither skeletons come out of. So once they're coming through the portal, we're giving them a little bit of a nudge from this minecart over here that has a boat riding it, and then it has 2 chickens riding the boat. That way none of the wither skeletons can get pulled into the boat. And the way you do this is by first putting down a minecart, then putting a boat. It's important to put the boat while standing in the same direction as the rails are going. That way when you come in with your chickens, the chickens will be in the same direction and they won't actually suffocate in the walls. But this does push the wither skeletons out of this corner over here and into these bubble columns. Bubble columns just push them upwards very simply, and then we have them all being stacked here. Now normally they would take entity cramming, as more than 24 entities in a single area will do a massive amount of damage to everything and eventually kill them, but we can prevent this by having them stand inside of a block where they're actually climbing it. So just like ladders and vines, scaffolding can also be climbed, and I'm using that so they will climb up in it and then they won't actually take any damage. So far so good. We got a whole bunch of them sitting over here in the overworld, so they're not interfering with the natural spawns in the nether. So despite having a couple hundred of them stacked up, we can keep having more and more spawn in and add to the group. But now we run into a problem. We need to kill these wither skeletons using looting, which means we actually have to have a player holding the looting sword in their main hand and not in their offhand. Otherwise it won't work. But we can't have our player standing over here killing them because we need the player over in the nether dimension. That's because in order to get natural spawns in this world, we need the player to actually be nearby. And for my wither skeleton farm, we have the player AFKing up above the bedrock ceiling. So if we go way up above it, you can see I have my alt account sitting over here. So we're forced to be AFKing here in the nether dimension. So if we would want to use our looting sword on the wither skeletons, we could send them back through the nether portal and have them being placed in front of our player and have them kill them. The only problem is if we move the wither skeletons from the overworld into the nether dimension, then all these wither skeletons are going to prevent any more skeletons from spawning in our farm down below. And in the past, this was a typical way to get looting. You'd have to actually bring them back over to the nether and have your player whacking at them to kill them all. But my new through the portal looting will now solve this issue. So if we put the looting sword in our main hand and then put the rockets in our offhand, and then we just launch a rocket into the nether portal, it's going to go through the portal and actually get teleported and then end up on the other side. So I put my alt account over in the overworld so we can actually see the rocket coming through. So watch as I right click, you can see the rocket ends up coming on the overworld, hitting the top of the nether portal and exploding. That's because the rockets that I'm using are different than your normal rockets. The normal rockets just cost a paper and a gunpowder, and that will get you a flight duration 1 rocket. These are great for flying with elytras because they don't actually explode and do any damage to you. But the rockets that I'm using have more to them. They'll only produce damage if you first make a fireworks star. The cheapest way to do this is by using some bone meal for white dye and 1 gunpowder, and this will produce 1 of these. Then all you have to do is add the star with a paper and another gunpowder, and these will produce fireworks, but they're fireworks that can do an explosion. So for only 2 gunpowders, you can actually produce 3 different explosions, which makes it much cheaper than TNT, which takes a total of 5 gunpowder only to get 1 explosion, which means we can get almost 8 times as many explosions using the fire rockets compared to using TNT. Now sending rockets over into the overworld and killing the wither skeletons are considered to be killed from me. That's why it's dropping the XPs, and we get a chance of getting the wither skulls. But in order to get looting, we do have to have a sword with looting 3 in our main hand at the time that the mobs die. Now you could do something where you send off a rocket and then switch to a looting sword before the rocket actually kills them, and that way when they actually die, they'll see you holding the looting sword and give the extra loot. But just like my previous automatic looting farms, there's an easier way of doing this using the offhand. So by putting the thing that does damage in my offhand, I freed up my main hand to hold the looting sword. Now when I right click, the sword doesn't have any right click option, so what it's going to do is then activate my offhand and use its right click option if there is one. And there happened to be a right click option for the rockets, and by standing in front of the portal, it will send them directly inside of it. But how do I actually AFK this? Because if I just hold down or right click, it's going to send all my rockets into the nether, and I'm going to run out of them in the offhand, and once they are missing in the offhand, I won't be able to replenish them. Speaking of replenishing the rockets in the offhand, since they can stack with other rockets, we just have a dropper here, which is dropping them out or resupplying our stack. But even though the rockets are cheaper than TNT, I still don't want to use them all up. So I made a similar setup as my automatic AFK looting farm for slowness arrows. And that's by putting a gate in here. So I could go AFK, hold down my right click button, and what will happen is I'll continue to try to open and close this gate. But then I hooked it onto a piston with a clock. So every once in a while the clock's actually going to pull away the gate, allowing me access to the portal blocks behind it. Once the gate's out of the way, my player will then right click one of the rockets into the portal, sending it off. And that way I only waste 1 rocket each time instead of wasting a whole bunch of them. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual clock. It's actually pretty simple. We just got a little hopper clock over here. And then I take some of the power and put it over here. And I set the redstone in such a way so the piston's only turning off for a very short period of time, so fast that it can't even pull the block away before putting it back out again. So the way you would run the farm is you would aim right about here, and then you just hold down the right click button on your mouse. Now once it's held down, you can press F3 plus T and then release your right click button. And then once this pop-up goes away, your player will automatically be right clicking all the time. So that when the gate does move away, it'll automatically also release a rocket, which gets sent over to the overworld, killing all the wither skeletons that are piled up. Now you might need to give a couple attempts at right clicking to make it so that the player will only release 1 rocket. Sometimes they'll release 2 and sometimes they'll release 0. If that happens, just stop right clicking and then try it again. Now for demonstration, I do have this clock pretty fast, but you can actually slow this clock down by a lot. And for my setup here, I figured out that we only actually need to launch a rocket 4 times per hour. That means it's going to cost you less than 3 gunpowder to run this farm for an entire hour, all while getting looting at the same time. But how fast or slow you have the clock also depends on how many wither skeletons you want sitting over in the overworld, because if too many pile up in the overworld, it could slow down your computer. Now every time you send a rocket through the portal or wither skeletons go through this portal, it's actually loading the other side using the same chunk loading method I showed a long time ago, where it will load the initial chunk the item falls into, but also the surrounding chunks as entity processing ones, so stuff like rockets and wither skeletons will be able to move about. But since these chunks are loaded and there's no players nearby as you're AFKing over in another dimension, that does mean that if there's another player in the overworld, any hostile mobs which are way over here are so far away from any player that they'll immediately despawn. So this farm is most useful in single player where there's no one else in the overworld despawning your mobs, or by using 2 players with the second one sitting over here so they can't despawn. But killing the wither skeletons is only one part of it. We still need to actually collect all their loot. So when we kill them from a rocket, their items get pushed out of this water and up against this wall here very quickly. Then the items are actually smaller than the XPs, so the items will fall down through this hole and get washed over here on top of the hoppers. If I turn on the hitbox, you can see how small items are and how they can barely fit in the wall there. But when XP orbs come through, you can see they are twice as big and they'll end up staying in the water stream. Now all the items are aligned using this chest over here so that they are partly between that block and the same block that the chest is. And then I push them over this direction, which means they're on top of this hopper as well as in this hopper. And then I push them and line them against this chest here, which means now they're on top of 4 different blocks all at once. But since the wither skeletons only drop 3 useful items, the bones, the coal, as well as the skulls, I just put in 3 simple item sorters here that automatically pull out these items and put them down into the chest down below. You can already see how many wither skulls we got. But the wither skeletons also drop stone swords, but they're not very useful, so I'm just leaving them here to despawn after 5 minutes. You might not think it's possible for such a small item sorter to actually collect the thousands of items that are being produced per hour. But the reality is, all we need is for the hoppers to be able to pick up the items that are sitting above them within 5 minutes. And by putting the items between all 3 of these hoppers, we don't actually need a ton of hoppers or sorters to collect all these items in time, because just a single hopper here can sort away 750 items all before they actually despawn. And this is the main limitation on how many wither skeletons you can let pile up before having to kill them. But when they die, they don't only drop items, they also drop XPs. And we can actually pipe these back to the player that's in the nether dimension. So after we sort away the items, you can see the XP orbs are then getting washed by the water stream and getting pushed back into the exact same nether portal where the wither skeletons are coming out. That's because this portal is actually closer to the portal that is up here above the bedrock. So if we sit over here, we can actually see the XP orbs come popping out of the portal, and with the player close enough, they'll just start moving towards them and then gradually be absorbed. Now sometimes when sending a rocket over, you'll kill the wither skeleton that's inside of the portals, and then in which case their items will drop directly inside of the portal and then end up back on the nether side. But if you put your player close enough to the edge like I am here, you can see I'm actually close enough to pick up the items that are inside of the actual nether portal, including the skulls, which you can fill your inventory up with skulls so that when you AFK they will stack with the other ones. Or you can always come in with some hopper minecarts underneath to pick up the extra items. So just with my simple wither skeleton farm down below, it produces an average of 66 skulls per hour, 3,000 bones per hour, 2,000 coal per hour, and around 8,400 XP per hour, which will get you to level 60. What's really cool about this farm is you don't actually need an auto clicker and sit there and constantly kill the mobs in front of you, but instead it can all be done within the game using cool mechanics. And you can use this setup to get looting for any type of mob farm, which is going to be the go-to method for a lot of different types of looting farms. As cool as this farm is, I actually took this one step further and made it infinitely automatic and without using any redstone. My ghast design is really cool. The way it works is we have a ghast here that is constantly trying to hit me. So it's summoning in a fireball in front of it and then it moves it towards my direction. But I'm just slightly to the side of where the fireball is spawned in. So it moves towards me. But since it was just recently spawned in, it can't actually collide with me. So it continues on in that direction. The way I do this is by having a ghast that is in a minecart and then I drop it on top of a flower pot while also being held in from the sides by some blocks. This will make the ghast summon its fireball at a very precise location. And then what I have over here is a minecart, and the minecart is on top of a rail. Then I have it pushed up against this wall here, and that puts it in the perfect location. To get the ghast, I'd recommend building in a little platform using magma blocks in a biome that can actually spawn in ghast, and also put a little cage around it so when a ghast spawns in, it can't fly away. And then use your lighter to keep flying in and spawning in mobs and leaving it until you get one to spawn in, and then capture it using a minecart and move it over here. It's also safe for the player to dismount where it'll be placed behind these blocks out of the view of the ghast. And then whenever you jump into the minecart, it just starts back up perfectly. Now with the projectile going in front of me, I can use it just like with my fireworks. Now currently the ghast fireball is considered to be coming from the ghast, but if I hit the fireball and redirect it, it is now considered coming from me. So hitting it through the nether portal, it's now considered mine. And it can also do the area of effect, meaning that whatever it hits can damage multiple entities. And once they die, they will drop their XP and their loot. When the ghast fireball kills the mobs, it will then check to see who actually killed them, which is me, and then it will check to see if I'm holding a looting sword. And if I am, it'll apply that looting effect to the mobs that died. So not only am I able to kill mobs in a different dimension, and I'm able to get looting on top of that, but I'm also doing this with infinite projectiles. Unlike the fireworks, where you eventually will use them all up, the ghast has infinite fireballs, so I never run out of them. Now me hitting the fireballs doesn't actually do any durability onto the sword, but since I'm technically attacking the fireball, it is actually removing my hunger. and eventually your hunger bar will go completely up, and then it'll start taking away from your health depending on what difficulty you're on. And in hard difficulty, it could actually kill you, and that is why I actually have a beacon over here which is giving me the regen effect. This way, whenever hunger does a damage, then the regen will come in and re-heal it. And like the fire rockets, this method is AFK. But you might be wondering, how in the world am I AFKing if I'm constantly swinging my sword? Well, you could do this with an auto clicker, just have it constantly clicking about 4 times a second. But if you use a crazy trick that I showed way back where you rebind your keys, specifically your mouse button key, to a button on your keyboard, then when you go ahead and press that button and hold it on your keyboard, the game's just not going to click one time and attack with your sword, but instead it's going to constantly repeat that same key, meaning I'll be constantly attacking. More specifically, attacking 2 times a second. So to AFK this, all you have to do is put a weight down on the key, something heavy like a battery or a stack of coins. But the downside with this weight, but unlike the firework rockets where you can start it up and switch to a different window, you can't do it with this one as you have a weight on your keyboard. Because it never runs out of projectiles, and once you start it up, it continues without any new input by you, this makes it infinitely automatic. But on top of that, this actually doesn't use any redstone whatsoever, because all there is a ghast, a minecart, and a portal. And down below where my wither skeleton farm is, there's actually no redstone in this either, just a piglin that is attracting them to this drop chute, which are getting pushed in using lava and damage using the drip point. And on the overworld side, we're just pushing the mobs out by using a boat riding a minecart. And if you want to get away from using the power rails, since they have redstone in them, I just put in a iron trap door. And then this will push the majority of the wither skeletons out of here and into the bubble column over here. And we're storing up the wither skeletons just like the previous one. And when they are killed, their items are dropped in the water stream, and we're sorting them through the wall again, where they're going to end up over here. And instead of having a item sorter, you could just push them all into a chest, but it'll just take more storage as you're also storing all of the stone swords. The XPs are being sent back over into the nether portal by using a water stream, pushing them, and that's what it looks like when they die. You can see it all working, all without having to use any redstone. I also have the player in the nether close enough to the nether portal so that the XPs will just slowly move over and be absorbed. I also have it so when the ghast just shoots normally through the nether portal, it'll go straight on through and it'll just hit in the back of some water. When it hits back here, it will collide against this block and it will explode, but it can't damage any blocks because there's water in the area. It also won't damage these wither skeletons which are inside the portal, as we really don't want them to die here because their loot will be sent back to the nether side. That's why the fireball is shooting out on this side, but the wither skeletons are being pushed out on this side. That way when they're over here, floating upwards, they don't get directly hit by the fireball, which could instantly kill them and also send their loot back through the portal. This would also mean the fireball would explode inside of this portal, which would end up actually breaking the portal, rather than it exploding over here in the water where it's safe. The wither skeletons also have enough health that if an explosion happens nearby, they won't die on the very first explosion. Now the glass is just so you can easily see inside of it. I'd recommend probably building out of some type of blast resistant block like stone. But when the player starts to redirect the fireballs, I'm aiming a little bit up. This will send the fireball a little bit up and to the right in the overworld as well. This way it gets closer to the wither skeletons that we have stacked up and will do a bit of damage to them. And after a couple of hits, they will die. Now where you need to aim to actually get the fireball to hit these wither skeletons without damaging the other ones nearby is a bit tricky. But if you hit just slightly to the left, this is bad because it can actually clip on the side of the nether portal in the overworld and explode and destroy the portal. So depending on how well you've linked your portals up will kind of depend on where you actually have to aim. So using all these tricks, you can make an infinitely automatic wither skull farm with looting through nether portals, all without using any redstone or macros. And it even made a version of the farm which uses the new 1.21 breeze mob. These are the guys that you can find in the trial chamber structures and spawn in from the trial spawners. And they shoot out projectiles which can damage you if they directly hit you. Otherwise, if they just hit near you, they just push you around like an explosion. And these can be redirected like fireballs and sent through nether portals. But they are different to the gas fireballs when it comes to the damage. Damage is actually only done to one mob, and it isn't like a big explosion that we see with the gas fireballs that can damage all the mobs at once. Because of this, you actually need to send over quite a few charges to keep up with the mob spawning. There's another problem when it comes to these wind charges that the breeze put out. There's currently a bug where they can't actually go through nether portals very easily because the game thinks they're actually hitting the portal block before it actually teleports. Just by placing something like banners, the breeze charges can't actually go through it, so it can't even hit you, which is really weird. You can even use a piece of string, and that's enough to stop the charges. So if that works, then the bullets will go through the nether portals. I'll put the bug report in the description if you guys want to upload it. Hopefully it gets fixed so the charges can be sent through portals more consistently. Now they can go through portals, but in order to do it you have to make the charge go almost parallel with the portal so that it teleports before it actually hits the portal blocks. This is a bit inconsistent. Now see how I did the unthinkable by making an automatic farm for every item in the game of Minecraft with this playlist here. If you appreciate the hundreds of hours it takes to design these, I do have a donation page through PayPal, and any amount really helps out. Or you can always become a supporter like these guys here and get extra perks along with it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!